Good afternoon again, everybody. Welcome back to Your Show. I will just make the obligatory mention at the beginning of yourshow.uk/donate if you want to help support the cost of the event. We're going to be talking unions, and I'm delighted to have two very eminent union figures here with me. We've got Bonnie Craven from the TSSA Rail Union and the inimitable Ian Hodson from the Bakers. Welcome onto the show. Thanks for your time, folks. Before my last appearance before this segment was a talk with Amir Amirani, who is a filmmaker who made a film about protests against the Iraq War. And we were talking about the role of protest in society now against genocide, against whatever. Then Damo came on. During Damo's section, one of his guests found out just before she came on that her family had been killed in the genocide there. So we're not talking theoretics, we're talking very real stuff. We're also talking about a mass assault by the so-called Labour government on the lot of ordinary people, and particularly vulnerable ordinary people, disabled people, the long-term sick, etc. And one thing I've been writing about as squawk books for years is that since the Corbyn era ended, it was really up to the unions to carry the baton now and galvanise working people in order to mount a concerted resistance to what's being done to us and what's being done to other people in our name. I would argue that the unions mostly have not fulfilled that. Your union has been a notable exception to that, punching above its weight for sure. I don't want to talk too much, so I want to hear from you guys. What's the union movement's role, and if it's not doing it, how do its members and other people get them to be doing it? Bonnie, you want to say something first?
So the trade union movement represents 6 million people, far more people than actually belong to any single political party. And the role of a trade union is so that workers can come together collectively to negotiate and argue for a better deal for themselves. Obviously, the Labour Party came out of the trade union movement. It was supposed to be representing working people. That seems to have got a little bit blurred. But what the trade union movement has, the power they should have is to hold power to account. And obviously, traditionally, a lot of trade unions have been fully supportive of the Labour Party. But sadly, there have been examples and cases where more needed to be done. A lot of the demands and expectations of trade union members and ordinary working people haven't been listened to. And part of that is because we've seen a decline in trade union membership since the 80s, and that is because of legislation after legislation that makes our work as trade unionists harder, makes it harder to motivate people, to get people around. You can't do secondary strikes, you can't go and support other unions if they're taking industrial action and things like that. So these are all things that trade unions now need to build. We need to build proper political education for our members, because that is the way that we achieve the gains we want. And we need to be putting pressure on whatever government it is we've got, whether they're Labour, Tory, or whatever we end up with after the next general election. We need to be putting pressure on them and making our demands clear, because that is the only way ordinary people are ever going to get heard and are ever going to get anything like a fair deal.
Ian?
For me, the trade union movement, I think, has been looking in the wrong direction. I think it's been looking for solutions politically instead of organisationally. I think we need to realise that our strength doesn't come because politicians give it to us, but because we organise people on the ground. And I think one of the problems, probably for the last 50 years, is that we've forgotten those principles. Yes, we can win a dispute. Yes, we can have strikes, but we don't actually build anything. We don't build the union movement as such. We spend more time actually as trade unions either poaching members or looking to politicians to find the solutions to the problems that we face. And the problem with waiting for politicians is they've never actually delivered for us. The only time we've had success is when we've organised for it, we've fought for it, and we've won it. And I think that's the trade union role. I think the trade union role is to build it, to organise it, and to invest in that rather than invest in politicians who actually will just deliver and keep delivering for the same narrow elites in this country, the wealthy, the powerful, you know, those people that they're afraid of in the media. You know, so for me, the trade union movement needs to get back to its roots. It needs to be organising in our communities. It needs to be recognising that the fight we've got is still with the far right. It's still with those people who want to divide us, who still want to believe that you know, somehow the answers to our problems can lie in deporting people. We need to win those arguments, and the trade unions need to be invested in that, rather than waiting for some Labour politician to come to our aid. They never do it out of power. They never do it in power.
Are strikes inherently political?
I think some can be. I mean, you know, I've always been very proud of the Hovey strike, for example. That was a very political strike, really, because it was about the move to go to insecure employment. I mean, it was about 0 hours contracts and the employers' opportunity to introduce right throughout the bacon industry 0 hours contracts. And if the Hoveys had been successful in that, you know, then I think every other bakery in the country would have taken that same model, and the security of employment in our industry would have been absolutely ground into dust. So I think, you know, strikes can be political. The stuff that we did against McDonald's and Witherspoons, for example. I mean, that was about raising the issue of insecure employment. It was about 0 hours contracts again, and the fact that young people were expected to try and survive on insecure employment. I mean, a 0 hours contract, you cannot get rented accommodation, you cannot plan your life, you're waiting at the end of a phone. And I think those were definitely political strikes in a way, because they raised real political issues. And I think that's the job of trade unions. You know, that model really awoke working class communities. The support we got was phenomenal. The financial support we got from other trade unions. You know, and I'm pleased now to see the likes of Unite Hospitality, for example, you know, spreading that organising model right across the hotel and restaurant sector. I think that's really, really important, because the reality is that's the types of employment we have in this country. So I'm really pleased Unite have continued with that model.
What about you, Bonnie?
Yeah, well, look, I think the most important achievement in the sector that I represent members for on the railways, it's a couple of years ago when the government decided they wanted to close every ticket office. So obviously there was it was a political campaign, because the drive to remove our members' jobs came directly from the government. So we had to fight it on political terms, but we also raised the sociological issues as well. So a major part of that campaign was about equalities, about equal rights to public transport, about, you know, safety, about lone working. It was about looking after and making sure women were able to travel safely, because quite often that person in the ticket office is keeping an eye on you as you get on and off a train, especially if you're travelling on your own or after dark. And the work, it wasn't just my union, it was all of the other transport unions. So our members worked really closely with the members from the RMT and ASLEF. And we did a combined campaign, and there was a government consultation. And as a result of the work we did working with disabled groups and, as I say, with our sister unions, we managed to get the media, which is quite a rare thing, and the general public on side, to the point that it was the biggest ever response to a public consultation, so much so the government had to extend the deadline because of the amounts of replies they were getting, saying the general public want there to be staff at railway stations. It's as simple as that. Yeah. And we actually, you know, our members did take industrial action. We had very successful picket lines. We had a hell of a lot of support from the general public. In a way, it kind of politicised a lot of members. Trade union members aren't necessarily political, but it really raised the issue, and it really made the general public see how the actions we were taking to protect our members also protected the public services that they valued and that they wanted access to. So we did actually win a U-turn on that from the government. It was massively successful, and it's really important to use those opportunities to help build awareness amongst the general public and amongst people who are in membership or might be in membership, to get involved in the value of being a member of a trade union and raising your voice collectively. It was great.
The reason I ask, I mean, there are some unions who seem to take a very apolitical role, and even maybe, advocate divorcing politics from the pure workplace industrial kind of actions. On the flip side of that coin, we've seen just in the last week or so the general strike in Italy about the genocide in Gaza, which appears to have driven the Italian government to some kind of action, at least, even if only to head off the immediate threat of the strike continuing. But are we missing the trick if we don't treat strikes as political, and if we don't take the big view, the umbrella view, if you like, of the whole working class and labour movement to galvanise its power and to actually flex its muscles and force politicians to do stuff they may not want to do? Ian?
For me, the opportunity to build working class power is by organising around issues. My union, we launched a campaign to abolish 0 hours. We launched a campaign to say that, a young person shouldn't be getting paid less because of their age when they're doing exactly the same job, and in many cases training people to do the job who are older than them but get paid less for doing it. We should have a minimum wage. Initially when we first started it was for £10 and £15, and obviously now we recognise that inflation's moved on and the cost of living's increased, and we need to look at a realistic wage that people can actually live on without having to fill in endless forms to prove they're living in poverty, so they can get the benefits to support them. We actually think corporate welfare should end, and that money should be used back to invest in our public services, to keep jobs in our public services, to make sure that they're properly funded, whether that's in healthcare, so these are all politics. This is all political. I spoke yesterday on here and talked about the fact that the division in the workplace is real powerful for a manager, because if it keeps us having a go at each other and keeps us divided and stops us from working collectively, then what happens is we stop talking about the issues that really impacts our life. We might be working long hours, we might be putting in all the time that we can to try and get the best wage we can, but the reality is it's still not enough. And if we're divided, we're never going to win anything in the workplace. We have to be united. And that's where the power at this moment seems to be. It seems to be in the hands of people that want to divide us. And that's again why I think trade unions have to look at themselves and say, why are we losing this argument? How do we change this approach? Where do we put the pressure? And how do we build that solidarity again? And it's by us organising. It always comes back to that. It comes back to conversations, it comes back to one-to-one conversations, it comes to conversations like this, it comes to investment in each other. Because we've never won anything by being divided. And we won't see things improve by being divided either. It might sound simplistic, we just deport people and suddenly we can, get everything that we want. But the reality is people were told that about Brexit. And then we got the small boat issue.
Yeah.
Now there's 32,000 people apparently stopping us from being able to fully fund our NHS. There's 32,000 people living in hotels that's stopping us from being able to build council houses. There's 32,000 people in hotels, which is forcing everybody in the country to have to rely on food banks if their wages aren't enough. But yet, those food banks have been going. I remember John McDonnell coming to our conference in 2010 talking about those food banks. And that was before we had the issue of the small boats. So how did that happen? I think it's low pay, insecure employment. I think those are the real issues. And when we really look at it, it's the hardship we suffer that's the problem. And that's why, again, I say, let's stop being, reliant on a Labour Party which no longer represents our class interests.
Yes.
And let's start building, strong trade unions that invest and cooperate with each other to build our movement again.
I think that's exactly why the Ticket Office campaign was so powerful, because we did work with the RMT and ASLEF and we built a collective pressure, basically, that forced change. And that's the only way we can do it.
Yes, it's interesting. You mentioned, Keir Starmer's party not serving our class interests and has no intention of serving our class interests. I think that was clear very quickly after he got his bum in the leadership chair. And yet he was then invited to speak to the TUC. And we've seen, over the years and even the decades, a parade of union leaders end up with their bums on seats in the House of Lords. is the union leadership class, if there is such a thing, compromised in the sense that it's too tempting a route for them to find themselves in the House of Lords, that they don't really want to be radical and serve the class interests rather than the interest of the people who can reward them at the end of their tenure? Who wants to go first on that one?
I'll give a very brief answer to that. I think it's very sad that a trade unionist should seek power in that way, because basically most people who are active and employed, as I'm lucky to be in the trade union movement, are doing it because they want to see the best for other people. It's an altruistic thing. You want to try and help people get together and make a logical case to secure the wins that they need to make their lives better. So I think it's a real shame. I'm not sure how you achieve that by accepting a gong and going and sitting in a silly hat and a fancy robe, quite honestly.
I mean, my position is, look, I want to change the system. I want to bring the system down. I don't want to be part of the system. So for me, the idea that I would work all my life to do that, to say that the system is wrong, to say that we're not getting a fair deal, and then at the end of that to take an honour for doing that, to me is very hypocritical. I mean, I don't think any trade unionist should be in the House of Lords, and I hear the argument about, oh well, I'm only going to go in there so I can vote it away. But I don't see it happening, anytime soon. All I see is a continuation. And then what people do is lose faith. They lose faith because they just think, well, they make all those fiery speeches, don't they? Make fantastic speeches, fantastic contributions. And then, the King's shilling comes along and says, here's a shilling for you. All right, thank you very much. And to me, that's not what I believe trade unionism is for. I think trade unionism is for, building a solid working class base to improve the lives of everybody. When I rise, I want to rise with everybody. I don't want to rise on my own or be rewarded for actually representing people. Because if I'm doing my job right, they're not happy. Those people who are making those decisions.
Yes.
And I want to make them unhappy. That's how I see it.
Do you want to run all the unions? we could do with some of that. I mean, I won't name names. I will be at some point in an article on Squawk Box's column in the Canary, but I am told that one of the leading unions at the at the Labour conference this week, Labour got a bloody nose yesterday with the passage of this motion on the genocide in Gaza. No doubt that Keir Starmer and co will ignore it because they've already said that that's what they do. But one of the unions tried to pressure its delegates to abstain on the motion, which would have caused it to fail. Have we got an issue with people in positions where they're serving other interests than the ones they ought to be serving? I'll let whoever feels they can answer that one.
Look, when you're employed by a trade union, your job is to serve the interests of the people that put you in that position, that pay your wages. It's the bottom line. And I think that anyone who's watched today's programming would struggle to find anything but complete admiration for the people who are struggling and suffering in Palestine. I think that the general public's perception of what's happening over there is just pure horror and upset. And so I think, given that at the Labour Party conference, anyone who goes there representing members, they're not representing their own views. They need to know. Part of my job is to understand what matters to members and how we get them to achieve what matters to them. Right now, what matters to them has to be an end to the abomination that we're seeing across the whole of Palestine. So if anybody is saying, oh, we shouldn't vote on that motion, and thinking that that's what their members believe, then maybe they need to go back to their members and have a conversation and see if that's the correct position to take. Mm-hmm.
I mean, from my perspective, look, obviously as a trade unionist, my belief is that what makes us strong is when we recognise which side we're on. I mean, we're not on the side of the bosses, are we? We're on the side of the workers. I mean, and I've probably got more in common with the workers in Palestine than I have with the people who are dropping the bombs on them. That I haven't really got anything in common with people that drop bombs or making those political decisions to drop those bombs. I mean, so for me, as a trade unionist, I believe it's right to stand on the side of the oppressed. If you don't stand on the side of the oppressed, who's going to stand with you when you become oppressed? You know, our job is to, you know, I can't get away from the fact that it has to be built on solidarity. There has to be a recognition that it doesn't matter whether you're in, you know, in Preston or Poland, you know, or Pakistan or wherever in the world. You know, it's solidarity, isn't it? You know, it's got to be built on solidarity. If we don't show solidarity with people, you know, who are being absolutely slaughtered, you know, in their tents, you know, waiting for food. If working class people and its organisations don't stand in solidarity to that, then how can we expect anybody to come and say, I'm going to take secondary action in support of, you know, your strike action. I'm going to turn up at your picket line. How can you expect anybody to come and support you at your time of need? We either recognise solidarity is about how we work collectively, or we say some people deserve more solidarity than others, and in which case we believe in inequality. And if we believe in inequality, we accept injustice.
Yes.
And we're in the wrong job.
and that to me is it in a nutshell for me. If you accept inequality and you accept injustice, then the trade union movement wouldn't have a future.
I think it was Tony Benn who said, you know, watch how your government treats people in other countries, because that's how they'll treat you if they think they can get away with it. And I think we're in a situation where our government is trying to see how much it think it can get away with in treating us the same, and trying to see how much it can get away with in terms of doing worse to people in other countries as well. We've got 7 or 8 minutes left on the discussion. Let's try and turn it into a positive direction. I think we have got, there are issues with trust in union leadership to a degree. There are issues with people believing that unions can help improve their situation, which I think is largely comes from them not paying attention or not realising that everything's political. And, you know, there's an obvious need for more people to be in unions because we're all stronger together. How do the unions move from where they are now to where they should be in terms of mass strength, in terms of, you know, Bonnie, you mentioned we've got 6 million people in the unions in this country at the moment. How do we turn that into 12 and then 20 to make sure that the government has to listen when we speak?
Some of the problems we've got right now is as oppressive anti-trade union laws came in off the back of the miners' strike, and jobs and industries were lost through that battle. We've lost the intergenerational link. So it would be, if you were a young man, you followed your father down the pit, he belonged to this union. The first thing you do when you go along, you join the union because it's your conversation, it's your life outside of work, it's what you hear about, right? That's gone. And the regressive anti-trade union laws that have been passed in the 1980s and indeed until very, very recently, it's got harder and harder for trade unions to organise legally. That's made a problem. Obviously, there was some pressure on the Labour government to change the Employment Rights Bill, and some move has been made on that for some improvement, but still it's quite limited. Still, we've got more work to do on it. So in order to turn things around, what we need to do, I think, as a trade union movement, is we need to educate younger people about the value of belonging to a trade union. Often it's when you're new in a career or new in a workplace that you are the most vulnerable. That's when you need it. You're worst paid. You've got the least employment rights protections and so on. We need to ensure that when people leave school, college, university, whatever, when they get their job, they join their union first day. And we need to make use of, hopefully we should be getting improved access rights to workplaces, which will mean that we need to be everywhere. We need to be in those workplaces, and we need our activists, not just the paid staff, but the activists to be singing our praises. You know, they took on this fight for us and we've won this. You need to join so you can help us and we can help you and all of that kind of thing. We need to build education, help people understand the value of belonging to a trade union because we stand together in solidarity. But we also need to be pushing the government to allow secondary strike action and solidarity between unions. We want sectoral collective bargaining. We want to be arguing. It's ridiculous. We're in pay talks at the minute and you've got 4 trade unions sat at the pay desk. Now, with every single employer in the industry. Why are we doing it for every single employer in the industry? It would make sense. People in the railway industry, especially since we should be seeing Great British Railways coming in soon, it should be one set of negotiations across all of the unions going to it will be a single employer eventually, so we're told. we should be arguing for a better deal for people that work on the railway. You should be able to be arguing as the Bakers Union, Unite and whoever else represents members working in your industry for a better deal. The Employment Rights Bill as it stands doesn't include that right, but we need to be campaigning for it.
Yes. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would agree with everything that Bonnie said. I mean, the reality is there is an opportunity to start showing, you know, a government working in the interests of working class people by putting down that legislation. But I also think that the trade unions, have to show leadership. I mean, like I say, you know, when we did the stuff around £10 an hour, I mean, it was amazing how we, you know, suddenly brought a load of youngsters that got involved with trade unions. When we started talking about abolishing youth rates, how many youngsters, you know, under the age of 21 got involved with trade unions because there were issues that impacted them. You know, I mean, at this moment in time, I'm working with Workers' Policy Project on a campaign called End Not Defend, which is about ending sexual harassment around the issues of health and safety, saying sexual harassment is a workplace health and safety issue, you know, and it should be covered by health and safety legislation. The Health and Safety Executive is saying, well, actually, it's nothing to do with us, even though the government signed in 2022 the ILO Convention 190, which said it was. But you think of the lives that would change if the unions all come together, which they passed a motion to do, around getting that change in legislation. Imagine not having to go to work and worry that you might be sexually abused. And all your employer has to do currently is say, I've ticked the right boxes to protect themselves, rather than I've carried out a risk assessment and now we're going to nullify and get rid of the risks of you coming into the workplace. Imagine if trade unions were organising around that. That would inspire so many people to understand the difference trade unions make to people's lives. And I think it's campaigns like that that change the trade union movement. I think it's getting involved in issues like around low pay and fighting about low pay, not accepting, you know, a living wage set at, but actually saying a living wage should be set at a level where people don't need to rely on benefits. You know, and when we say we want to abolish 0 hours contracts, we mean we want to abolish 0 hours contracts, not some of them, but all of them. And when we say we want to get rid of discrimination, we say that includes young people being discriminated against in the workplace who are paid less, not because they haven't got the skills, but because they haven't attained the age. I mean, and then let's reinvest the money that we would have had to subsidise that low pay back into making sure that if you want to go to university, it's not at your price that your parents can't afford. And let's re-establish the fact that if you're a disabled person trying to survive, you're then not asked to pay for the tax missing in society. And we actually say that actually the welfare state shouldn't be used to demonise you, but to support you. And to me, those are all trade union issues. And if we come together around those issues, we could rebuild our movement, we could grow our movement. And if we put those issues at the centre of everything, then I think that's how you go from 6 million to 12 million to 24 million, you know, to everybody wanting to be part of a trade union. It's about how we build. And it's about how we're relevant to people's lives.
Yes.
And that's how I think the trade union can restore itself and rebuild the faith of the working class communities in the country.
Yes. We've got about a minute left. Are there any practical steps that people who are already members of the unions can take to make sure that the people who are running the unions do that stuff? Because it's got to be
if they don't like them, they should vote them out. and they should, you know. I mean, as a national officer, I stand every 5 years. If you don't like me, you vote me out. And it goes for every, you know, national officer. If you don't like your executive, you don't think it's doing a good job, then don't put up with it. You know, the democratic processes are there. You know, if you think they're wrong, then vote them out and put the people in that'll do the job for you. It's in your hands.
Yes.
That's what collective organisations are for.
Yeah, and I think really we need to encourage anyone who belongs to a trade union to get the person that sits next to them at work to join the union. And not only to join the union, it's not a matter of joining a union and paying your money, your subs every month or whatever. You need to get active. If you're interested in becoming a rep, take the free training. It's really good to have on your CV. There's transferable skills and all sorts of things. Plus, it's a confidence booster and everything else. Get involved. Stand to be an industrial rep, health and safety rep, qualities rep, whatever your interest is, there's a role for you in your union. And for goodness sake, please go to your branch meetings and tell your colleagues, your friends, the other people that work in your sector what it is you need, what the problems you're facing are, and do something about it. Spread the word, share messages, write leaflets, whatever it is. Organise in your workplace to get your colleagues on board. We grow, we get stronger. It's as simple as that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to my guests for their time and expertise. We'll see you in a few minutes for a discussion on war. Who is it good for? Because somebody's benefiting and it isn't most of us. Thanks for that. Yourshow.uk/donate, don't forget. And see you in a tick.